technology leader at DLR Group, and I have watched his previous talk at AEC Plus Tech and other forums, and I thought I should really host him because he has so much wisdom in terms of data strategy, building construction tech products. So I'm fortunate to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
I see. So people who don't know Bill, like, what are some career highlights and pivotal moments till date?
I mean, I've done a lot. So I'm getting older. But I mean, like my job role at DLR Group, I'm the design technology leader, which is a really broad. I mean, I get to work with all the disciplines and all the sectors and all the buildings that we work in, and it's a global firm. So I get to work internationally. We work with Autodesk and all the other major players in the industry. So I mean, that alone is a big highlight for me. And then outside, or I'm also an R&D studio leader internally. So through that, I've gotten to work with a lot of different universities, research partners. Like I've been a thesis advisor for USC, and I'm a adjunct professor for Washington University in St. Louis, which is a school I'm not even sure that I would get into if I applied without my resume, kind of thing. And then like an exciting thing with me is I'm a LinkedIn Learning content author, so like I get actual royalties from LinkedIn for just really like learning technology and trying to teach it to people. So for me, it's you love what you do, and you every day is kind of like a hobby.
I see. That's amazing. And how has the like whole journey after your college graduate? Like, what were the times you had to make crucial or difficult decisions?
I mean, I've had several, and I always get asked like how I ended up in technology leadership. Because my background, I've got a bachelor's and master's in architecture, and I did architectural design for about 10 years. There's a few years where I was like half technology and half design, um, but I loved doing that. I learned Revit in 2004, and because of that, every single place I ever worked at, it was like, hey, Revit, help us transition from CAD to Revit, or help us be on the BIM standards committee. And so you start doing that. And at one firm that I worked at in St. Louis, Oculus Inc., I was leading a lot of, or really most of the healthcare design, because we had some people depart. And so I was pretty young to be doing that, but you're managing your own projects, you're doing the production. And then I was always paired with the newest employee that was the worst at Revit. So like for me, I was doing 50 hours of work on the day job of architecture, and then 20 hours of work helping the office use Revit. And then we were working on like standards templates for retail things, because we did a lot of like Aldi's and Verizon Wireless and AT&T, like these repeat templated projects. So we would have really good BIM templates with those, but at some point you just can't do both. And so I was at Leidos, and it's weird because Leidos is like this big cybersecurity firm or company, and then they had this small design, build, construction part of it that they acquired, and so that now is Benham, a Haskell company. But so at the time it's Leidos, if you look on my resume. But when I was there, the design tech BIM lead left, and it came up like I was asked if I wanted to do it, and that was one of those big moments for me of, do I stop designing or do I go into technology? And I went out to dinner with friends and talked about it. I talked to my wife about it, and then eventually I did it, and I've never looked back. And that's been like the real big hard decision for me at any point is, do I stop designing and help just teach and implement how we use tools to design?
I see. Man, I can understand how what are the pros and con evaluation like and stuff like that.
It was a
And
lot. Yeah.
any managers or mentor you wanna highlight in this journey?
There's one that I always give credit to, Mike Merrill in San Diego, and so that's really early in my career. I was still in school, and he went on vacation. And again, it was one of those, I learned Revit too early. So he had a project in Revit. I was helping him. He's going on vacation, and there's nobody else, and the project's in construction. And he goes, "You're going to handle CA." Well, I'm out, and like I don't even know what you're supposed to do. And he gave just great advice of like, well, yeah, in this industry, you're never really like comfortable because you're always pushed into a new thing. And as soon as you are comfortable, you're probably ready for the next step. And so just make a decision and make sure you have logic behind it. So like he was just this really good mentor because he actually like talked about things. And I feel like our industry and it unfortunately because of technology, but like the communication pace and things are just really fast and they have been the whole time. So that mentoring that I always heard about when I came out of school, I never really saw it. So there aren't that many like really strong mentors, but the ones that are there are so valuable. And somebody like Mike really helped me early in my career. And then another one is a professor I had at Southern Illinois University. It was Shai Sharabi. He in one of his classes, he's like, learn as much technology as you can. And I took it to kind of an extreme of I said, well, each semester for design, I'm going to learn one new platform, good, bad, or whatever. And so like I did one in Rhino, I did one in SketchUp, I did it in Revit, and like your project would not do well because you're like learning technology at night and then trying to get it to do it. But what I learned is I learned how to learn. So I
Mm,
learned how to learn software, learn pros and cons between those. And so when I was done with school and you put me into into an actual firm, I suddenly know all of the tools and what they're good at and what they're not. And when you say, hey, we want to model this thing or do that, I can kind of say, oh, well, this one does it way better than that one. And here's how it's going to connect the dots between them. So those that moment really kind of set me on this trajectory and I didn't know it at the time.
it's amazing. And do you see a difference between how AEC firms perceive technology investing in budget a
Oh
decade or
yeah.
decade ago versus now?
Yeah, and you never want to like say anything bad about anywhere that you've
Eh,
worked before. It's a very
eh,
small industry. So I'll be very generic about it, but I'm at where I'm at and I mean at DLR Group because the firm itself it really did show that they're looking to invest correctly in technology. There's tons of stats on just AEC in general and how we're lagging in innovation
mm,
compared to other industries, and it's a lot of it has to do with the reinvestment of our funds into R&D. And so most firms don't invest anything in R&D. DLR Group invests quite a bit into R&D. I actually have a budget that we apply to just targeted R&D. I have an employee that does R&D all the time. But the big driver for me, and just like if you're somebody trying to evaluate where you're thinking about the firm you're at, when you present to your leadership, and if you present on technology, I've been at places where the response is like, "Oh, that's neat." Like, well, I know you didn't listen at all or care. And it was like, or like they just kind of give like a surface level wow or dismiss you, which is even worse. Where what I've noticed different at DLR Group is I get challenged where they're like, well, why are you doing that? How are you doing that? What's the like? They've pushed me on a heavy return on investment, and like my last LinkedIn learning courses, it's ROI for construction technology. The only reason I can do that sort of course is because of working at DLR Group is I have to have those answers. And like I always had it in my head, I always drove it in ways, but they've honed in my ability to talk about it because I have to. And other firms don't do that. They may just say no all the time, but if you can justify return on investment in something and have really good logic for it, it drives the company and you can do big, meaningful things if you're targeted in that way.
I see. I'll definitely link that show in the episode notes.
Oh,
And
cool.
uh, this is a very interesting perspective of like there are firms who have significant R&D and there are firms who
Hmm.
don't. So once you have, how do you make choices how to use that funds? Because hiring a professional software developer takes so much of the resource
Hmm.
budget, and when to use third party tools, when to develop internal tools. So can you help us navigate about the strategic way of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, you always have to be aware of the overall firm's resources financially. Like you can't just go in and say, like you can't be at a 40-person firm and say I need $2 million in team. Like it's not going to work. You have to know what your impact on the product of the company, and for AEC, the product, or really A&E firms, the product is the design of the buildings and the services we provide to our clients with those. So you have to look at how much of that you can actually impact and go after, be very strategic, go after the things that I always call it the big rocks, but there's that jar of rocks analogy of how do you fill a jar of rock or a jar when you have big rocks, little rocks, and sand? Well, you put the big rocks in first and the little rocks and then fill the rest with sand. you got to find out what the big rocks are so that whatever you're working on really makes an impact. And it's not just time. So for me, design technology, I always have three things that I look at. And does it improve efficiency? Does it enhance quality? And does it enable us to design better in some way? And if it does those three things, it's immediately something more important. And with what we have to do, there's always something better. Like this is graphically better than that, or like, there's just so many different things, but they're little differences and they don't move the firm in a big way. So my first filter is those three questions. And if it doesn't say yes to all three of those, fine, it's going to improve something, but I'll let you put your effort into it, and I'm going to put my effort on the one that has the three things. And then I look at, is it adoptable within our firm? What is the overall cost on this? What is that actual efficiency gain? Then I evaluate what that is, and that determines if I want to do something with this. And then the options are always, look out first. Like if there's something that's able to buy, you should probably do that even if it's for a period of time to justify that you want to build. It's easier to have something to show that there's value and that, we could actually build this for a fraction of the cost that we're going to pay over the next 3 years. So we should do it. But you don't start there. And like building software takes years for it to be good. So you're usually behind the curve if you just start out and say, we're building, we're by default building. We tend to not do that and tend to look for things that there's gaps. And then my other one is have a long-term vision on where you want to go. And mine really has been focused on artificial intelligence impact for the design process. And for us, I came to DLR Group. It's been 5 years now, and I was asked evaluate the firm, see where we are. Computational design is like we have computational designers. Some of the ones that we have are very, very good. But as a firm, that's not like the primary thing. You're not a Zaha Hadid style building, which everybody says in like Mid Journey now. But we do school design, we do things, and so you're not targeted on that so much. I'm also not going to catch up to a firm that's really good at that and trying to apply a strategy. So I've always seen machine learning and around computational design as a way to like create the data sets to train to do predictive design in the future. So we put a heavy emphasis on machine learning and artificial intelligence as our like what's our data strategy to feed the information to use machine learning to do design. So in doing that, I also prioritize technology that grooms data for me so I can have a better data set.
Nice. And I really like the point you can look back at your firms and the type of projects you did and find a differentiated value in this
Hmm.
technology space. Not everyone wants to be the best computational designer. Like if you're doing the type of projects, what's the best leverage
Let's
or IP you can develop?
Yeah, and I mean, what's buildable, what like unitized mixes, like, and computational design it comes in so many different ways. It's not just swoopy buildings. It is efficiency and analysis. So we've tried to build language around it of like, well, yeah, there's form finding, but there's also analysis, geometry translation, like optimization. Those are ways that we look at it. But it's not just pure form. And a lot of people in my role that I talk to, they'll say, "Oh, we don't use SketchUp. We never use SketchUp. We're pure BIM, no SketchUp." And for me, DLR Group uses a lot of SketchUp and designs really well. And I can never say you can't design an award-winning building with SketchUp because we do it all day long. Many firms do it. It is like a primary design tool for most people. So I don't disregard any tool. I look at the tool ecosystem, then design around that. And then, sometimes we're trying to guide change, but change isn't immediate. So you can't just say, no, this is gone. You have to naturally get people to go there or get people to want to go there.
Yes. And I'm curious to know what's your KPI or like a success metric look like for your role. Like, do you have any specific examples how we can measure it?
Like, how am I doing as far as the firm goes, kind of thing?
Yeah, like how much the firms improved in digital technology adoption or usage.
Yeah, and some of that's like my job description. The first line literally says, "Make DLR Group on the leading edge of design technology," and for the AEC industry, is like okay, that's a big sentence. Challenge accepted. But how do you determine what that is? It was like the first thing I set out to do, and so I've got this slide that I show all the time. I call it the buckets of design technology, And all that I was doing is creating categories to be able to evaluate on it. And it's connected BIM, design visualization, digital review, computational design, reality capture, GAS, analysis and simulation, and automation and AI. Those are like the big categories that I look at for us within our firm, in that things are design technologies. There's other things out there, but for us it's that. And then I can look at software that we have, applications of it that align with those, and evaluate, are we doing well in this area or not? And so at least for that, I've got like a focus area that allows me at a sandbox to stay within. And then with that, I have broader goals for the firm. In DLR Group is an employee, it's an ESOP. So we're an employee owned firm, and the stock value of that firm is evaluated by a third party person. So the way that that has more value for our investors, which are us, is if we're putting more revenue through the firm, or somebody determines AEC is worth more, or the things that we're working on is worth more. So like some of that I can't control, but what I
Mm,
can control is efficiency on our project. So that's a like primary focus for today, is improving the efficiency of our projects. Because if the goal for the firm is to grow more revenue, that's growth in size and capacity. And like if you just start like doing math of it, of the number of people that you need to add in, it's so staggering to keep that going that it just doesn't make sense. And then there's always a conversation of like, do you outsource work when you're overloaded? Do you, are you not? And then where does where does AI come in and disrupt our industry? And for me, it's always anything that's repeatable, that is doable over and over again, should technically be done over and over again by AI. So I focus on that, and like, don't outsource those things. Use that as a way to automate. And it's better to just take time to code something to automate, like sheet setup and things that are kind of low value, things that you might send out of house to somebody else to do. Don't send it out of house to the automation. And then our goal with that is to reduce like 20% of our workload through automation. And so I've got a phrase that I always say is automate 20% of your job year over year. And that's what we focus on ourselves as the design technology team, so that we free up more time to do additional focus on those buckets of design technology, so that we're building a skill set that is beyond just traditional BIM management. And so in doing that, like, we have our own 20% target that I watch, but then we're watching the firm and trying to grow the overall automation use of our tools and the overall efficiency of projects. And so that's really like that metric that I look at, is like, how how much less hours did we need to do for these projects, and how much how profitable was it as a firm, and then you're also looking at the soft metrics that are out there of like, are we winning awards, or are we just reproduce, like, are we copy and pasting the same building? Then no, that's not achieving the, did we design better? So making sure that we can also design well has to be a part of it. So we look at like award submissions and things like that.
that's quite interesting. 20% year over year, and then you
Mhm.
feel the magic of compound. So,
People initially, when I started, I know that that wasn't well received on the team. I had some on my team were like, well, I don't know what my job's going to be. It's like, well, what we did is like automated archiving files. We automated, like, a lot of firms, they still will pay somebody to open a Revit model and write into an Excel file, like, how many warnings are there? What's the file size? How long did it take to open? And we're like, immediately we're going to use Imagine at Clarity to do that. The file archiving, we use Clarity to do that. We built a portal to take the accounting numbers and the project number, create the BIM 360 site, create the Clarity site to monitor it, and then upload our template to it, bind all the files together, rename them. And then now that's syncing with our project staffing tool, because what we found is, like, all of a sudden when we went to BIM 360 for the cloud, a design tech manager's job became adding emails to a project. And it's always on request, like, hey, I need to add you to this project. So I go on, I add you. And it's like, well, this has nothing to do with my skill set. It's just because I have the admin rights on the projects, I have to do it. So that was one that we automated. So we always look at like those tasks that don't matter, so that we can spend more time doing just in time training and things that actually matter and impact and are fun.
I really like all the examples you mentioned, because these are like designers or people facing it in their day-to-day projects.
Hmm.
And so which made me curious, like, how does this problems reach out to you? Do you interview designers, or based on your own domain experience, you already know this are, and how do you prioritize what to work on?
Um, I'll rephrase just to make sure I'm answering the right question. Are you asking how do I like get the ideas of what we need to work on? And yeah,
Mhm.
it comes all over. So we have like you have to have a little bit of top down, you have to have a little bit of strategy, and you have to have a little bit of innovation found in the projects, and you keep those things working together. So what we do is we have a large forum structure in that we have groups that work together by what your vertical is. And what I mean by that is like there's a forum for a sector. So like K-12 for us is a sector, or culture and performing arts is a sector. They have a forum and they look at their style of building. Then there's a discipline forum, like the architecture, engineering, interiors, and planning each have their own forum. They talk as a group on what do we need to do as a group, as a unit to do better. We have what's called the integrated practice forum that is the discipline leaders, and then we meet when things bounce outside of our our vertical that matters. So if something impacts interiors architecturally, we talk about it there and make a decision as a group and then push that back out. So that's kind of that top down group of like actually before this I'm writing a square one post of we're calling it analysis export. We used to call it gbxml and now we're using gem file, so we're just got confusing. But we decided, oh, we need a better way to export out the file for analysis, rather, because what we're finding is all the teams are redrawing all the rooms as boxes and then analyzing them because it's hard to make an airtight analysis ready model. So we met as a group, we talked about that, we prioritized it, we wrote out the work plan for it, and then agreed this is like number one thing that you have to work on. And then from there you're like balancing the checkbook with the hours that you have to make sure that all the number of people that you have and the hours available to do it work. So there's like that sort of thing that happens. We have within each discipline what we call a power user group. So it's like your heavy design application users that come together, and there's one person that is a point that's kind of like the say within the discipline that's supposed to be a liaison to the broader forum. So these are people that aren't like driving decisions, but they're there that with a good informed opinion. So that group always looks at what their problems are. They give us things, we prioritize those within the overall workload of what we can do. But then our design tech managers have a billable target for them. And what I would say is like if we're doing more work on projects, then we hire more. Like that's
Mm.
what it is. And so they're multidiscipline. Like we hire anybody and we try to keep a balance. So we have planners, we have engineers, we have architects. We try to for them focus on like low code applications, so like a Dynamo or a Grasshopper, so they can help the people on a project team. And you just give them some framework to think through things. And DLR Group loves venture capital investment as like a concept. So I just 10x is like the phrase, like, oh, we want to invest 10x on everything. So with that, I just say if it takes you 1/10 of the time to write the Dynamo script to do that, rather than doing it manually, it's worth taking the risk in trying to build the script, and then you can help the team out. And so that's a way for us to like build certain workflows and things with project teams that have to happen because the project is still going to be inefficient. We may not have an enterprise application for this, but we have a quick script that's going to make it work. And that has led to some really powerful things. Like we had this one project. It was for our K-12 is school design for us. Our K-12 group had an entire master plan of the U46 school district in Chicago area. So it was like 46 campuses or something at the time. And like we've scaled way beyond that. Like I want to say it was like 46 campuses of buildings that we had to go and put reports out for. And all we had were CAD files. So they wrote a script to read all the CAD files in the folder, make Revit files for each of those, make the levels by the number of files, load the files into them, draw room separation lines around all the walls, drop a room in the center of those, pick up the room tag in the CAD file, name the room with that, and then export a scaled vector graphic that could be used in Power BI to make a report. And that scaled into like some big things. And we've ended up doing like we did the master plan for all of the schools in Puerto Rico, and that was 856 campuses. And like same that we've now built it into a Revit button, but it was from that project of like, hey, they have to do this, and like you just do like say it's a minute a file, and it was each level in all the campuses and each building of all the campuses, and it was maybe 3 weeks of time would have been sent like setting up the file, and then we took the time to write like maybe 2 days to write some scripts, and we did it. So that sort of logic allows us to catch the innovation. And then the other thing that I do is architecture works on something, interiors works on something, engineering works on something. I always think things are like the same core math problem, but you're applying like different variables to it to be able to get an answer. So I like to show what the different disciplines are working on once a year to the other disciplines and put seeds in there. Or like I would say planting seeds and dangling carrots for ideas of I just throw stuff everywhere and then whatever grows, I help it. So I'm planting the seeds in the heads of the discipline of like, oh, this tool could be used for this. So we had one thing for interiors, it was called Smart Copy of I lay out furniture in a room, and then it rather than use like model groups or super families or all the complicated things, you just store it as a JSON and then look at the other rooms and apply that same logic to it based on where the door is and some key features in the room. That works for like ceiling layouts, lighting layouts. And so like we showed that to our engineers and like, yeah, that's exactly how we want to work. We want to figure out one and apply it to the rest. And so we took that same math problem and applied it different logic for ceilings and then wall hosted things. And now it's like a big robust solution. We've got a little button that says update when like there's a key room, and then there's all the other rooms that are based off the key room. And it seems to be working. It's kind of similar to what like Schema's doing. So it's all very exciting.
Bill, I'm very honest. It's super impressive the way you approach this automation problem from ground up and building the tools and all the like examples you're sharing. Like it's super
I
impressive.
just get to have fun.
I see. So like okay, there's 0 to 1 thing of finding the right problem and then making the tool. The rest is also ensuring people adopt because it's from what I know it's challenging to
Mhm.
convince architects to adopt new tools. So how do you go about that?
I've so my boss is our CEO, Steve McKay, and he goes around the firm. He's like, "Bill's on an island all alone, and we can't have him be." And I've started the phrase of embrace being on the island of like, I mentally have to like prepare myself that this is going to be a very long haul, and I have to not give up. I can't let down. I have to keep myself mentally sharp to be able to do that. And my whole goal is to drag people onto the island with me, but I know it's going to take very like I might get it with one boat, and then the voices get louder and louder, and other boats hear me, and then they come, and like you start to drag people in over time. So that's the thing of like you have to just know it's going to take time, and you have to have all means necessary approach. If you say something like, "Oh, I posted on the internet," and that's all you did, you're never going to have success. You have to like catch the person in the project. You have to talk to the person. You have to challenge certain people. Some people you can't challenge because it's going to make them turn away, but some people you kind of have to get them and bring them in. So it's becomes more of like a psychology game than anything of like, I need to read who you are and what drives you and speak to you in that way. And like, somebody might care about the efficiency of it. Somebody might care about the quality that it creates, and just know what that message is, and then modify it by who you're talking to, because it's all the same thing. It's kind of like energy, like sustainability. If I'm talking to a client who cares about the environment, I'm going to lean into what the climate impact is of it. But if I have a financially like focused client, I'm just going to talk about how much money it's going to save them. It's the same thing. It's just changing what the value metric is.
I see. And from what I saw, like it's also sometimes how do you identify a champion within the project group and
Hmm.
like advocate adoption through them and it's
You have to prop those people up. You have to like people are people. They are prideful, they have egos, and you have to know how to help people. You have to find somebody that really is young in their career and needs to be seen, and make sure that they're seen and say thank you. Say the history of where things came from, and talk like it's not all my ideas. It's our ideas. It's us as a group, and you're pushing in those ways, and that makes it work. um, to like name drop Steve again, but when I interviewed a DLR Group, I had breakfast with Stephen Kai, and he gave this very odd but great analogy of DLR Group of like it's like a giant balloon, and all the people are in the balloon. If you're on the outside and you're hitting it with a stick, it's just going to push away from you. But if
Hmm.
you're on the inside talking to all the people and moving around and getting things, it's going to create this energy and movement, and that's what's going to move the balloon where you want it to. And it was this wonderful analogy that like truly works. So like, no, just be within. Don't be on the outside saying they're all stupid and can't do it. Like you're there and you're there with them to figure out the thing, and that gets people to move with you rather than you trying to move them outside in.
I see. And I think sometimes as Pareto principle in our industry, what is 20% of the efforts that can produce 80% of the outcome? Is there
Hmm.
any like two or three things as part of your role that you see, or this thing makes a huge difference?
Um, I mean, there are like my grand vision in our process, and are you familiar with like Swap AI?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Swap, like they had the phrase at one point that was like blocks to docs. And then Schema is newer, but they're putting stuff out there and they're focused on that in between portion, which is where my head kind of sits. The idea of blocks to docs goes from I've got this conceptual box and it's really just adjacencies, but I haven't figured out all the solutions, and AI figured out all the solutions and generated construction documents. That's where those things can fall apart is if that's where the gaps and there's lack of buy-in. So I really have always wanted to have like a hyper developed 3D file that I do like a virtual punch list, so to say, at the end of our early design phases. So like design development for us in the United States is the second, like schematic is when we're coming up with the idea. Design development is when we're really answering the questions of like what is in the room, what does it look like, how does it look. I just want to walk through every room in the building virtually, like in virtual reality, multiple people, make changes in there that get tracked or pushed back to the design application, but you sign off and say, this is it. And then I automate all of the construction documents, and there's no changes from that point forward because I've solved the design solution, and everything else is documenting and developing the design intent drawings required to build it. I think that saves 40% of the job, and it has less questions and errors, and it drives to all sorts of benefits in the industry. I'm also one that thinks BIM as a deliverable is something I'd love to see. It fits with that is I don't actually need documents if I'm doing BIM as a deliverable, but I struggle to do that if I don't have this hyper developed file that tells me where everything is and what everything is. So that's kind of why I really like I either get automated documents or I get BIM as a deliverable, but what I either way, that's where I want to shave that time off is just providing the thing that nobody questions.
That's the ideal workflow, right? You change
Hmm.
and it's all
Yeah.
there's in
Uh,
software like continuous integration, continuous deployment, do
mhm.
one change and everything is
Yeah.
correlated. Sorry, you were saying something?
Uh, no, but I will throw out one thing that I didn't, because earlier you were asking on strategy for firms. I didn't really touch on for smaller firms, and it's something I do like to get out there of like it. We DLR Group partnered with two other firms and Imagine It to help build the space programming module inside of Clarity. And that was a high cost thing as a whole, but when you split it up amongst two other firms, it's not that big of a cost. And so partnership isn't done in our industry that often, but if it should be, and it should be done in ways that it doesn't like change what you do versus I do. And the CIO at Perkins and Will actually had a great way of saying it. He said, "Oh, it's hubcaps." Because everybody tried to model off like the auto industry of like, hey, we're gonna share and work together, and not everybody knows what that means. But the auto industry, like the sharing and working together, they weren't like sharing their designs of the cars. They were sharing the standard things or agreeing on standard things together. And like the size of hubcaps was one of the examples of like, we just standardized on size of hubcaps, so we each didn't have one, so somebody else can make hubcaps, and we're focused on the car and doing the things. And so like the space programming for us was the hubcaps of like, no, we need a tool that stores the room requirements. I don't care what your room requirements are. I care what mine are, but we still need the same thing. So we're going to pay money together to get this and not all develop this on our own and fail. So if I'm a smaller firm and I don't have a data scientist, if I don't have something and I have a similar style of data that I want to work with, I would consider partnering with another firm to do that. Even at DLR Group, I would consider doing that with other firms. If we can partner with somebody else to get more, maximize the dollar on our investment, why would we not do that?
Isn't yeah, like I guess you were referring to Murali. I worked with him, and like he's from Perkins and Will. So
Hmm.
yeah, but like this is great. You mentioned because I sometimes think from the small firm perspective, they have limited budget and resources. So how can they bring value to big
Hmm.
firms? Collaboration apart from finance side is what would be an ideal exchange? Like if someone wants to collaborate with DLR Group, what are the requirements?
It depends what it is. Sometimes you just need bodies for things, and we find that there's so many things happening in our industry that like internally your own team gets pulled in 1,000 directions and you don't have the bandwidth. So some of it's like, hey, we're going to work on this, you're also going to share a code repository for it, and we'll work together on this part of it, and you use it but you've contributed, like that sort of thing exists. There's some great firms that have a ton of open source, and the problem is most people don't contribute. Like I've talked to Robert Otani at Thornton Tomasetti, and every time I talk to him, he's like, "Yeah, we have that open source that's sitting there. Nobody's ever like forked the repo." And it's like, "Oh yeah, like you could do that." And you can meet with them, and like you can work off of some of these things. HOK is one that has always published a lot of their content, and like big content, like the whole code base of what led to BIM Beats. Conrad Saban, when he was there, posted that. It's called Mission Control, and that's out there. And like
Uh-huh.
it's hard, but you can take some of these things and work with them. So there's things like that that I think people need to do more. Is just search GitHub.
And maybe like a good directory of all open source AEC projects would be
No,
useful.
it's funny. Like we put the things of like all of the AI, like there's like 50 lists of all the AI solutions that are out there. It's like, like at a point you're just like tracking Google,
Mm.
but there isn't one for the Git repo that is like I can repurpose this for exactly what I need. And some people do it, but nobody's put a list out there, so it might be a good thing.
Yeah. And I have seen numerous discussions on this topic about like data for lack of data for architecture or AEC in general for machine learning training.
Hmm.
So couldn't be a better person to ask them. What do you think is the bottleneck of like AI developments or and there are also concerns of lack of structured data. A lot of companies are sitting on data but they might not be leveraging it in an efficient way. So can you share your thoughts?
Yeah, and I mean there's ranges of issues with it. At its core, I think some of it is our data is very complicated, and it takes a person whose background isn't AEC in like data science background more so than AEC. And so it's rare to have both. And so a lot of times when you're talking, there's this gap in communication of like what is our data and what does it actually mean. And so that gap makes it hard. And then the accessibility of our data, like it's there, and BIM is actually really structured data. Even IFC files, you can read that with Notepad. You can make your changes outside of Revit and apply those, and like it's very structured. It's understanding that structure and navigating it in a meaningful way that's hard if you can't talk through that and do it. And then also a lot of people don't centralize that data where it's easy to get to, and then like the act of having to ingest and move is very hard, and then our contracts make it even harder. I can't just hand over all of our files to you because many of our contracts are written in a way, and it's using just broad language in the contract. Like the client doesn't want us to put pictures of the inside of their building because it's like a private secure place, so we don't want to put those pictures out into the internet that everybody can get to. So we'll say no collateral from the project can be used for what, and so, like that's a broad statement, and it's like, well, now that one entire set of drawings and everything, I can't really use it for much, or I can't use it, or I can't give it to you to use it and share that with anybody else. So we're kind of stuck to our own silo of information. So I think that's one of the challenges that we have, is how we write our contracts for what we actually own and what we don't own. And then the last one is probably just like not having the skill set to do it is like it is actually there. It is with like large language models are starting to chew through our stuff. Because a few years ago we were trying to look at specifications and like pairing those back to Revit takes forever to go through that if you're doing it in like you're writing out what the format is of it. But large language models are starting to spot our spec formats because they're actually very structured. You just aren't using traditional methods of coding through it. It's not a relational database, it's estimating a database. So we've recently started working with a graph network, and it's a graph of a project of project has a project number for us, and then there's the location of the project, and then there's the levels and the phases. Each level has rooms, each room has stuff. That becomes a blob. But then also the specifications are sitting in a project folder that's tagged to the room. So you can start to say, oh, this project has all of these things. I may not be connecting the spec to the item inside of Revit, but I'm associating the like branches of the specs with the project. And what machine learning is great at is looking at like these dots and pixels as this blob of dots is similar to that blob of dots. And then you can start to say, how, find me the project that's like my project. And that's how you get to search suggestion engines of this room is very similar to that room. Here's the things that you might want in it. Here's the other things that are very similar to yours, but that you don't have in there and you might want to have, or that your project blob doesn't have these details that we see that are on all these sheets. Do you want these details? And so if you start looking at it in a structured blobby way, it actually does really well. I'm blown away. So to me, a lot of it's probably skill set.
Interesting. Your last point just gave me a thought. What would be a autocomplete like solution for like BIM or like architecture project look like?
Um, have you seen me present on that one? Because
No.
that's my dream. Okay, this is a little bit of a long spiel. So my dream state, and sometimes I like to show PowerPoint design ideas as it because it's that. But like PowerPoint's design ideas, you put text and a picture on a slide in PowerPoint, it gives you like 15 different slides, and you click on it, it just puts it in there. Um, I kind of want that for rooms, and so you always have to like my background in design was a lot of healthcare. And healthcare, you get lists from the clients of like, this is what's in this room and this is what needs to be in this room because this room has to function for a specific reason. And it's a lot about fitting boxes inside of the bigger box of the hospital and fitting the stuff in the boxes. So with that, if I've got the list of the stuff and I know what this room is because I've already laid out the rooms, and I play, let's say that I've got a list that says you need a desk, two chairs, and a bookshelf. As soon as I place the desk, I already know like relations to that desk, and I should be able to pop up those design ideas pictures of like, here's the next thing. So there's like the auto complete of what's the probable next answer. And then my son is like way into evolution books and dinosaurs, and like his favorite period of time is the Cambrian period. Like it's just like deep knowledge on the planet. And so there's a thing in there called cladograms. And so Darwin with evolution, there was the tree of life where one thing leads to another, and that's like that assumes that you know everything. And when you don't know every single thing, you can't figure out what thing led to another thing to figure out the tree of life. So they started using what's called cladograms of I draw one line on an axis and I put all of these different groupings of animals or plants or anything that's a living thing. And I look at the features and group them by the features. And then I find out what's similar to that thing or not. It's not even that this thing led to another. And if I did a cladogram of I need a pill-shaped aquatic carnivore that has a dorsal fin and flippers, I could technically get a ichthyosaur, which is a marine reptile, a dolphin, which is a marine mammal, and a shark, which is a marine fish. All of those are very similar in look and feel, but very different. And so what I want is the design ideas to show me the autocomplete next answer, but then enough inspiration that it's similar but different that I get shark, ichthyosaur, and reptile. Like, I get this variation of stuff so that I can get design inspiration beyond what I'm doing. And so we've kind of looked at it that way of we're structuring our data so that we can say what's similar and what's the next nearest neighbor, what's the further out thing. So you get design inspiration, and we're looking at where in the design process that happens. So if I get the list of spaces, I want to look at that list and make suggestions to that list right then and there. And I call that the space program audit. hey, DLR Group on average, our projects, or our fourth grade classrooms on average are this in the state of California. Your list is 10% smaller. You might want to ask the client if you want to increase it. So create the conversation then. And then there's when you're designing to help you autocomplete and finish the design. And I think that dramatically speeds up the process for us.
Promise me you're gonna make this happen.
We're trying.
This is such an incredible vision. I love it. Yeah, especially when you said with the PowerPoint analogy. I think
It's it
he's
just
on
makes
to
sense to
something.
me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We are doing it with details. So we we use Clarity for a lot of things, and you can use other tools. But what Clarity's cool is that it can open a Revit file and do a bunch of tasks. So we can like write a Dynamo script and then run it on all of our projects and get stuff. So it's really good for generating these data science data sets. Well, it's also saving us time on our day job. So it's justified being there, but I use it for other stuff. We exported out a picture of every single detail in every single project, and then we exported out the like metadata about it. So like, what's the project number? What is in the text of every note that's in that drawing, and what's the stuff that's present? And so that becomes the like features of this thing as a thing. They're like named as blobs, and so then we use Clip AI to look at the pictures to see is this picture similar to that picture, and then is this blob of text similar to that blob of text. And we did that. We're like working through areas. So we did it on our typical details for our disciplines, but then we also are doing it on all the details to see what basically like focus ourselves. So what we do every year, I feel like, is say, oh, we need a typical detail initiative. So we collect all the details, we review all the details, and then we mark them up. And then we have like 1,000 of every similar detail. We don't know which one we want to go with, and everybody wants theirs, not the other one. And then we never get anything implemented. And then we do it again next year. So what this does is looks at all the details we collected, tells us what are your big groupings. So, okay, these are the groupings. So now we can get rid of the duplicates. And we got it to say like this is 100% the same or 99% the same or 98% the same. And we adjust that filter based on the discipline. Architectural, 99% of the same is the same.
Mm,
Structural, they have differences. Like it could be a line and a half circle and it's filled versus not filled as a fillet. Like that little bit of information tells the welder what they're supposed to do on a weld. So there's like we had to put it 100% not, and like the only difference is the view name or like where the project where the detail sat within the box. So for them, we're able to really hone in and focus on just the actual typical details. And then by doing that same analysis across the whole portfolio, we can get to that 80-20 rule of we're going to work on the 80% in our project or the ones that are only in 80% of our projects today. And then we'll get to the rest of them. But then we can start to focus our efforts. And then what we'll do is start to do suggestion in like a content browser and say, hey, these things are here. Do you want this one instead? This is similar but different. So we'll do the same logic, but just on details because it's something we can do and we can save ourselves time figuring out the AI data logic for it.
okay. Another gem of an idea because like I really believe like clip or even like the vector embedding approach,
Hmm.
there's so much opportunity of better semantic search from your project docs or from your
Hmm.
detail search or floor plan visualization search. And
Well, it's just one of those things. Our industry, like we have client standards. We have an industry where you are taught to do something one way, then you're hired in from another firm, and because we're a services oriented industry, you're just thrown on projects. You're not like you don't come to a firm and then you train on the firm for 3 months before you can touch a project. You're thrown on projects. And so they start to work in the way that they did at the last firm. So most big firms have a bunch of different people that work in the way that they know how to work. They're not wrong. Like I may call toilets TLT because that's the way we abbreviated them in our last firm. I haven't had time to read the 900-page manual of how you do it, so this is what it is. So unless you have tools that help you, you're gonna lean on the ways of the past, so to say. Um, but if I write the name of a detail differently, like the toilet one's a great one of like a bathroom, I might call it TLT or men's or women's or something. It's still the same room, it's still the same design, but that name throws it off when you're trying to find all the details named this. But if I look at the picture and the content and do it that way, I'm able to actually say, no, these are the same. I only
Mm.
need to manage this one, and we need that one in there. And you know what we're going to do is track that it was also called these other things, so that when I call a room that, I know it might be these other things already.
Yeah, and this is a classic example, like I've noticed as well. Like, let's say you want to analyze bathroom of all projects. The
Hmm.
bathroom label is in itself different in all these
Hmm.
projects, or like some designer for. So
Yeah.
the first level of data cleaning or processing is okay. Can you have the labeling in the right place and then
Hmm.
extract the information?
And that was the like first in production custom developed AI thing that we did at DLR Group is we built a tool to help in life safety drawings or code analysis. And if you've ever had to do that in Revit, there's like it's kind of like the model group superfamily arguments, but there's areas or rooms, and there's purists in both. Like there's people that love one, hate the other, and there's pros and cons in both. You actually need a blended system, but you can't do a blended system because you're duplicating work or like things become out of sync and it's at risk. So what we did is programmed a tool that pops up, looks at the room, it reads the square footage of the room, the number of doors inside of it, and the project type, and it estimates what the IBC function of space of that room is. And it tells you the percent of confidence from AI. So, and you know, we did some early running of projects that we tagged and ran it, and then what we'll do is improve it each year. So it's going to get better and better, but initially it saves a lot of time. Then it also reads the similar rooms when I set it. So if I set one that's called classroom, reads the similar ones, and it like ups the confidence and like presets those. It still has manual tagging from the designer because it's our life safety analysis, but that little bit gets every single design project to tag the room with a standard way for me to look at it. Whether it's the name or not, I can include the name, but I can at least now include the name and weight it towards, oh, this is an office space because IBC says it's an office space, or this is a conference or a learning or a bathroom. And so it helps there. And then we also did the same thing for our MEP space types. And like that, it's working, and it's the first way for us to tag information to get the teams to groom it for us, and then we can keep building on AI to make that better and better.
Mm. I must say you are the idea guy. So I'm gonna ask you this.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of solutions. Like I personally see a bit more saturation in the conceptual design phase or
Hmm.
visualization phase for design. And as we go towards the construction detailing, there are fewer and fewer and
Hmm.
code check. For founders or computational designer or technology leaders who wants to build useful solution for the industry, what are a few ideas you can ask them to tinker or think about building?
You sparked ideas with me in just the intro to that question, because a lot of people are focused on the design side, and it's hard because you're like when you do design software, you're competing with existing mature design software that does everything, or they have their tricks when they have to do that. And if it doesn't do the thing that the designer wants it to do, they won't use it. Like I can show Twinmotion and Lumion for renderers inside of the firm, and if somebody loves Lumion, or they love the sketchy view of Lumion and they don't have exactly that in Twinmotion, Twinmotion can have VR, it can have a better render, it can do all of it could be 100 times faster, and they're not going to do it because it doesn't do that sketchy mode. So like the couple sticking points, they're always there, and it's hard to get over those when you're trying to develop new design solutions for somebody because it has to be so robust at the start. And so it's really hard in like agile development where you're pushing things out and iterating to get there, where there's a lack of things in construction. Well, that's what you said that like triggered me. I'm like, that's where I'd start. You go where the landscape's more open. Um, and what we're looking at with the details is really like, how do you predict from what's modeled in BIM what a detail should be? Or where a detail that is drawn actually should go throughout the project. And I'll give an actual example on that. We did this R&D project. We called it automating construction documents. And what we were doing with that is trying to figure out, could we automate construction documents? We were writing scripts for like everything that we thought we could do. One was, where do you cut your building section or like the wall sections around the building? So what we did is like trace the perimeter of the building. We shrink wrap the building first, and then trace the perimeter of it by cutting lines at every foot. And then what we would do is look at each line, and is this line different than that in what it cut through the building? And then you keep only the unique ones. But then when you talk to like our documentation, do you cut the wall section through the part of the wall that has the door, the window? Do you do all of it, or are you just trying to make sure that you get the features to give the design intent of what that is? And so we never were targeting all of the unique conditions. We were targeting enough of the unique conditions to describe the intent of what we're trying to build. So you end up doing too many, or prioritizing to which one. But then if I'm on construction, I need to give clear direction for each part, or make sure that each thing is thought through and developed. And so I would start to look at those, see where all they need to be applied, or how to translate the design file into construction file. Because there's a lot of things that we do, and there's some software out there like Structsoft doing structural wall studs and things like that. But to do the whole thing, it is time intensive, and that there's lots of areas that you could look at. And it's just translation of like location of room boundaries into other forms.
I see. So one definitely. And what sparked me, like the way, like you mentioned about twin motion, like
Hmm.
for founders who are from under industry, like even if your software solves 95% of the problem, and if doesn't have one feature of annotation, and people still will not adopt because
Oh, it's amazing.
designers need that everything. Like it's a tough customer
Yeah,
acquisition.
yeah. Well, and it's one of those things like I try to keep myself humble and understand the logic of it. And like to me, I watch all students coming out of school. It seems like they're all taught Rhino. And there aren't many that come out with Revit. There's very few coming out that know SketchUp. And then like you have a lead designer that's using SketchUp. So how would you get that person into the other program is what you're always trying to do. And you have to realize that that person is responsible for delivering design of multi-million dollar project in a very short amount of time, and they can't fail. And they're staffed in a way that they do that project, they're on to the next one. Like it's such a fast pace with high risk of failure that they're not going to take a risk on some program. Like there are some that just like myself in the description of studio in school, they're just serial testing of new products. But there's others that they don't have the bandwidth to learn it. You get a family, and like a lot of times you learn at night outside of work, and you don't have that. Suddenly you stop doing that. So you have to find ways to get people into those with a low threshold of risk. And I think that's one of the things we forget to do. And it maybe like doing more design competitions, or internally do a design competition where you're limited to software, because that's where a great designer is going to find a way to make a pattern inside of a program, and you just have to show them like the 5 things to make a pattern. That's what's going to build their comfort level inside of that program. So the adoption strategy has to be better from our side.
Mm, I see. And what do you think about like the complexity of the problem itself, like construction detailing automation? Like for you have like so many different types of building typology from residential to healthcare, and one
Hmm.
might work better for residential but not work for healthcare. And then if a starter addresses too many things, the focus problem. If it's just addressing one small sector, it's not large enough market to make a VC investable
Hmm.
return. So
Well, and even the like you could have a market, and that market has certain material availability or certain skills in the trades for those, or there's unions that require it, that you can only group of people can do it, and they're going to do it the way they do it. So that it immediately introduces more variability on what could be consistency, and that makes it hard. And that's probably one of the big challenges for our industry as a whole, is like yeah, you want to do it. That's why you like the idea of it being mostly prefabbed, or like machined and manufactured and then assembled, is a wonderful idea, but it falls apart in certain areas because of things like unions or availability, or like how do you transport it there? And those sorts of things just make it so challenging that it doesn't happen.
I see. We are almost on the hour mark, and so I wish I
I
can
had one
continue.
random one to throw out for you.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I'm all in
back to
for ideas.
back to the what else you would do. This is my thing that I've started like telling people, is if I had to start over, on things I've worked on R&D wise. Like I probably wouldn't, because what we have is working really well and very exciting. But there's one gap that I have noticed is the translation from physical to digital. We have a lot of designers that love to sketch on trace, that love physical models, that love certain things, and there's not much out there that does a good job of translating that into something digital, so you're not doing analysis and doing the like things that make it a better design, but then pairing to the things that they really like to do in the craft of design.
Thank God you said that. Like, so I was trying to solve this for the interior design. A lot of time for
Hmm.
like a renovation, everyone has a PDF or a PNG image, and they have
Hmm.
to translate to CAD or other
Hmm.
software for. And I was like, since 2000, no one has an API or a solution that just upload a flow plan and will create a CAD layout. It's,
Well, there's stuff that does it, but it's not great. And like they're like, well, it's got to be vector. It's sketch. It's not vector. Like or it makes it not orthogonal. Like you have to have it do the rules of what we need. And the technology's there. There hasn't been the focus to do it. And so that's an area that I am starting to like collect my research around and see where we go, because I think that's a big opportunity in getting over the hurdle.
yeah. So I tried testing various machine learning models published by academia. The thing
Hmm.
is, they are very good in one particular flow plan style. So if the
Hmm.
wall has gray thickness versus lines are solid and
Hmm.
not, then it starts to like break. So
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
diversity of it.
maybe the steps use like a stable diffusion or something to translate it to the format, or like the drawing format that you want, and use that as the why am I drawing a blank on the word, the control net, to
Yes,
like stay with the picture but change the style of the picture, and then use that picture for AI translation.
I see. Do you have 5 minutes for a rapid fire?
Sure.
Okay. So
Let me look at my calendar just to be sure.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I'm 90% sure I'm good. Yeah, go for it.
perfect. So you'll have 5 to 10 seconds to answer it, and you have to keep it super brief. Okay. Uh,
Wish me luck.
your favorite movie?
Ooh. Um, Strange Brew.
Any book or video that made a big impact in your life?
The Call of the Wild as a kid.
Your favorite architecture building?
I'm gonna say the Arch from St. Louis.
I see. Any travel city which is in your bucket list?
Um, I I do want to go to Greece. I have not been to Australia. So I'm just gonna go with that.
I see. What is three words your friend would describe you?
Depends what friend. But I would say some people think I'm fun. Some people think I'm very not fun. And others are just it, relentless. I don't know. I'll go with that.
I see. Uh, what is one thing you would do if you have unlimited time and resources?
If I didn't have the job that I have, I would actually have not even have a cell phone, and I would just like build stuff, and that'd just be woodworking in the woods somewhere.
Yes. A piece of advice for students graduating.
What I've been saying lately is have a primary and a secondary focus. Like if it's architecture, interiors, whatever, have that as your primary, but then make sure that there's a secondary that balances it out. That is more of your future proofing. That could be psychology, it could be computer science, could be materials research. Have a secondary focus to make sure that you're well rounded in the future.
I see. Any automation ideas which we didn't discuss in this interview and you'd like to share?
They're nonstop. Um, What is the one that I want? Honestly, there's one that we're working on that is like the smallest thing, and it's swapping out imported CAD files, turning them into links, and then linking them back in the same place. And Steve Theden's on our team's working on that. And to me, that like there's a whole suite of things that would lead to the automation of BIM management that would make life a lot better for everybody.
Nice. Actually, I wanted to pick your brain on recently I saw a diagram of chatting with your BIM model.
Hmm.
So one is like extracting data on floor plan level, another, but if you do vector indexing, you can just have
Hmm.
that. But if I want to sum on multiple levels the same information, or
Hmm.
how do I access data across projects and build like client level summary? Like how do you think about architecting this that kind of solution?
I mean, that's kind of what we're doing with that graph network I was talking about, and it's understanding the hierarchy of BIM and then structuring your export to match your broader export, and it's similar project to different project kind of thing. Um, and for me, my journey into like the data side of BIM started with or now we use Designer Pages Pro, but as spec sources in specifying furniture and equipment for interiors. And if you start to export the Microsoft Access file of the Revit database, you start to see how it's structured and connected. And all of a sudden, like Revit schedules make you mad because you can see what you can do with the connected data in a database. And it's really, really chatty. And everything you described is doable outside of Revit when you have the whole database of the Revit file.
Mm, yes. You know, this conversation like inspired me a lot of ideas and great insights. So thanks a
Awesome.
lot, Bill, for sharing your journey and work. It's super inspiring.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And hopefully I'm back again sometime. So always
For
great
sure.
chatting.
I
Yeah.
would love to.